So we want to welcome everybody today to our Family Medicine Grand Rounds for December the 1st. I'm going to go through some information here regarding your CME activity, but the code for today, it's 1008-7607. I'm going to go through the process here in just a moment on the next slide, but just make sure that you do register for that credit before midnight tonight if you are wanting to get that credit. So on the next slide here, there we go. So there is a new system. Many of you have probably we've already done it, but just in case, if you have not yet, you'll make sure to send your email address first to the number that's listed there. You can send it through a text. And then from there, once you've done that, you'll want to put attend and then the code. Don't put the plus sign in there, just attend and then today's code that's listed there in the red box. And you should get a message that looks like step 2 that says that you have successfully registered for your credit. But if you are having any issues, please feel free to contact me, Nicole Rubio, and I can certainly help you out with that. Next slide. So we want to thank everybody for joining us. As we get started here, if you could please make sure that your microphone is muted. I'll keep an eye on that as well. But if you would please be engaged and attentive in the session. And then I will also be putting the evaluation link in the chat box for everybody towards the end of the session, so that if you could help us out and provide feedback to our speaker. Also, questions throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box so we can have our discussion at the end of the presentation. Next slide. And so this is the South Texas Regional Family Medicine Grand Rounds, and we are partnered with the South Central AHEG, and our department's mission statement is there for you. Next slide. CME transcripts, I think that was the one just before this. CME transcripts are available for your viewing. If you need that CME transcript, you'll just go to our CME website. Here on this slide, it shows the AAFP credit that's available as well. You will need that CME transcript if you are going to apply for AAFP credit, but any issues with any of those things or questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Next slide. We do also want to take a moment to mention that it is our goal in these presentations to establish these physician core competencies, so you could see those listed there. Next slide. We want to also mention that Dr. Gonzalez Schlenker has no financial relationships with ineligible companies to disclose. So our presenter today is Dr. Carolina Gonzalez Schlenker. She is an assistant professor with the department, and she is going to be presenting today to us Promotores CHWs, Understanding the Ethics of the Heart. I can hear you.
Okay. For having me, Grandma, greetings from I hope.
It is cutting out just a bit.
Oh, really?
Yes. A little, yeah, I can hear you a little better now.
Okay. Just you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So my intent is that after this we'll be able to decide what is explain how they carry their work. Join us.
It's a little, I'm sorry to stop you. I don't know if the connection that you have, it's a little, your video wasn't on for a moment, and then I couldn't see your video. I saw your video now again.
Uh-oh.
I hear you.
When you say my video is the slides?
I see you now again, and I can hear you better now.
Well, I am in UHS, so here tends to be iffy. So I hope just stop me and I can always repeat, or just to make sure that it's coming through.
It's coming through good now.
All right. Awesome. So again, I was just saying the objectives, right? Is that you will be able to describe promotor or promotora or CHWs, explain how they carry their work of truth building, and to join us as we denounce and oppose the inhumanities that arise from our current social and believe that we have capacity to build a world that is more in
Excuse
sync
me,
with life.
Dr. Schlenker,
Yes,
when
Dr.
you
Hein.
when you turn your head to the right, we're not able to hear you. When you're
Oh,
looking directly into the camera, the
you can hear me.
microphone
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Yeah, it's my laptop. It's not very good. Okay, can you hear me now? So, again, that is the objectives of today. So who is this persona called a promotor or promotora de salud, or a health promoter? As the Spanish implies, the name comes from Latin America, but it has emerged in other parts of the world in which Western medicine has become institutionalized and governments have sought to expand its reach to isolated communities. My first experience working with Promotores was as a young physician sent by the Mexican government to provide primary care to indigenous Mayan communities. Given the colonial history of oppression and the resistance to acculturate to their oppressors' worldview, we needed to create bridges of understanding. We asked communities to choose someone who had gained the trust of the people and would be able to dialogue with us, so that through him or her, the people would believe that we really came to help. Once they were chosen, these promotores became formal liaisons between the community and the medical and public health system. Promotores had the voice of their people, and they were trained by us to understand what the health institutions were trying to do. This was in the late 70s, and Promotores became part of the national health system in Mexico, both for rural and urban communities. A similar thing happened in the US about the same time, as the Indian Health Services brought medical care to Native American reservations. The community health representative, up to this day, serves as a bridge of understanding between biomedical model of care and the healing practices of American Indians. Promotores in Texas came into the radar of our healthcare system mostly as they appear in the US-Mexico border, especially in the so-called colonias. Colonias are substandard housing developments without utilities like running water or sewage, bought as small lots, divisions of large pieces of lands sold by a landlord to poor people. Most primary care services at the border are given by federal qualified community health centers, FQACs. And they noticed that there was this person that came with different people from the same community to get medical care, just to advocate for them. Well, that was the promotora or the promotor. In 1998, the University of Arizona conducted the National Health Advisor Study, identifying core competences and roles for CHWs. This study served as a foundation for the certification of Promotores CHWs by the state of Texas. And in 2010, for an occupational labor code, which allowed them to be officially employed. That year, in 2010, still trying to understand how to best use Promotores, HRSA contracted Innovative Consultants International to carry out a study called the US-Mexico Border Promotora Analysis, of which I was the project director. Our task was to propose how Promotores could best be utilized by the border primary care FQACs. We interview FQACs administrators and health focus groups with Promotores along the whole border, from Brownsville to San Diego. We talked to hundreds of Promotores. One of the questions made in the focus groups was, what is your essence? What makes you a promotor or a promotora? And by the time we were in Arizona, I already knew what they were going to ask. Because after a moment of reflection, they all answered the same thing, that we work from the heart. And when probed to say more, they said, that the reward for their work was to see that their efforts made a difference in the life of those suffering. Importantly, what they wanted was for people to no longer need a doctor because they were now well. Their desire for people to stay away from healthcare was decoupled from that of the FQHC administrators. They were consumed with keeping their clinic competitive in the local healthcare market. No margin, no mission, Carolina, they told me. Promotores were nice people for them. But unless they were part of a grant that brought in revenue, they really fell off the administrator's radar. Well, this working from the heart did not draw curiosity from HRSA. When we presented our preliminary results, which included that decoupling between the Promotores and the FQHC's incentives, HRSA changed our final report requirements from being 50 pages long to 5 pages. So they really didn't want to hear what we had to say. And as far as we know, HRSA never published our results. To this day, Promotores CHW's role remains ambiguous. If you read the occupational code definition or other definitions like the one of the American Public Health Association or of the Affordable Care Act, they mention a list of activities that promotores might do, like prevention and education and informal counseling, etc. And what all the definitions agree on is that they are trusted by those that health institutions cannot effectively reach. But they don't define trust. We feel that unless their contribution to the health of people can be well described, Promotores CHWs run the risk to be devalued by the commercial biomedical model of healthcare. Let's remember that the contribution by healthcare to the health of people is no more than 20%, that there is much more going on. And unless healthcare has access to that information, its relevance will only decrease. Let's remember also that only things that can be measured and repeated can be subject to scientific inquiry. So we cannot extend the idea of evidence-based to everything that affects our health. Promotores have little capacity to produce their own conceptual frameworks. They are seen as less trained and therefore less paid in the conventional hierarchies of healthcare. So they must accept the concepts produced by a society that has tolerated their experience of oppression, what Paulo Freire called the banking model of education. They and their families face the ongoing uncertainties of poverty, and as the activities of low-wage workers become more technologically managed, the opportunities of poor people to talk meaningfully to each other decrease. But in spite of these constraints to their sense-making, Promotores CHWs working from the heart possess the skills for a finely tuned, sophisticated moral engagement. Their experience and capacity for compassion allows them to engage non-judgmentally with those whose suffering moves them in a shared divergent thinking to explore preferred futures. But once the desired goal is clear and commitments are made, they are excellent convergent thinkers as well, seeking results, because only results would alleviate the suffering that started their engagement. A key point here is that the shift from divergent to convergent thinking is emergent. They allow the interaction to take a life of its own. Their work has an organic temporality. That's what they mean when they say that their heart is guiding them. But understanding trust building remains untapped by those hoping to create national consensus on the role of CHWs in health institutions. To inform employers and policymakers about how to relate to CHWs, they present an individualistic view of how Promotores come into being. They show this pyramid, the base of which is made up of personal qualities that the CHW must somehow already have, to which a set of skills should be added that will allow them then to play the role that their employer is interested in. Not until then are they to serve the community. But that is not how it happens. Their qualities come from their growing up in community and in adversity, from playing different roles as the moment demands. It is from experiences of successful moral engagement, of braiding their story with the stories of those they care about, how Promotores develop their trust building skills. As one Promotora from the Valley beautifully put it, we come from below, learning new things, remembering old things. We accumulate experiences from different places, from different people. We do everything from the heart. And in each place, we leave a little piece of ourselves. In each loop of leaving and coming back, we become heart-driven workers. So this loop is the unit of value that Promotores rely on. It is a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It is by experiencing and learning from those stories that they become trusting and trustworthy people. Notice that a story as a source of order has a non-linear value, and that it cannot be prescribed. It must be lived. Promotores' engagement in other people's problems is spontaneous and authentic. Their incentive is the possibility of alleviating suffering. But if Promotores are given a job with a specific measurable outcome linked to some funding, as it was for us in our first year, we were funded to decrease A1Cs in patients with uncontrolled diabetes. They will produce the outcome of interest, and as we did. But instead of trying to understand how that is achieved, all healthcare detects is that Promotores, CHWs are cost effective. They're cheap labor. There are several risks lurking in here, and I won't elaborate in all of them. But after listening to more than 1,000 stories from Promotores of what is going on with patients that have high A1Cs, I believe that unless we ask deeper questions, our diabetes epidemic will continue to grow. And a deeper question we all must answer, and some of our patients ask us right on our face, is what is more valuable, life or money? Of course, we will all say that life is more valuable. But is it? We have a socio-ecological crisis that tells us we need to make fundamental changes to prove that it is. To make changes, we need to understand first where we are at. To understand why is our moral imagination trapped in economic value. We see that all those social determinants of health, lack of housing, of transportation, food insecurity, etc., are symptoms of a failed social design. A design with a generator function that is a win-lose game. Economics is based on game theory. And when the economic transaction becomes the main engine of society, we get a numerically organized life disorder because of what happens to information. So here is the economic transaction. I sell expensive, you buy cheap. It's a win-lose game, and we both want to end with the most money. There is no braid in our stories here. I'm not going to share with you my vulnerability. Instead, I'm going to send you a strategy and you send me yours. And we both hide and lack information. And we create contracts backed by law that spell out what we are interacting about and how I protect myself from you and how you protect yourself from me. And in that way, we make the economy grow. But we also grow uncertainty. And the more we play this game, the less we trust the information available to us. The more uncertainty we feel, the more stress we get. And as this win-lose game infiltrates our institutions, we lose the trust of the public and put at risk the fabric of society. And it is, in my view, that the one institution that we must never lose trust in is healthcare. When we come to healthcare, we are always vulnerable. Let's define healthcare as our organized social response to the process that goes from health to disease to care. Our mission is to care for those suffering from disease. That is what Berwick calls our North Star. The well-being of the patient as it is lived in family and community. We can only care for a patient as a person. To that information gathered, we can call it time one. We apply the protocols of care we learn in school, time two. But not just evidence-based protocols. We also apply our clinical wisdom and the values of the patient. Those are the three components of evidence-based medicine. From evidence-based medicine comes the justification for expenses, what we can responsibly go to society for financing. And Berwick says that any change in the system must be justified by the mission. But that is not how things are working for us. In our view, for two reasons. First, the simplicity of monetary value, driven by the win-lose generator function, accelerates our timeframes to match its replication, the return on investment. And second, because our attention is consumed in adapting to the dictates of this linear value, we don't give life or what breaks it the care that it needs. And care needs trust. And trust, as the Promotores show us, has its own organic temporality. It cannot be monetized. The effect of the win-lose game and its linear value produces a scarcity mindset, what is called tunneling, a narrowing of our perception where we leave things that matters to us outside of our view. Unintended consequences of commercial activity are called externalities. Making things or people that matter to us externalities just increases our sense of uncertainty. What is our role as guardians of life, along with public health, to begin imagining a transition towards a more life-driven social design? Looking at the ethical frameworks available to us in our health institutions, we find them insufficient to address the dilemmas we face. The fact that a patient that really needs to see us lacks the money for a copay doesn't get to our ethics committees. In our model, the ethical frameworks we use to decouple economic value from life value is care ethics. Care ethics, based on a feminine view of morality, maps our story. Care ethics describes an event between a caring person and a cared for person, and it requires 3 steps. The first is empathy, the displacement of the caring person's motivation to the cared for person's situation. This is an optimistic engagement in the problem of the other to really understand what's going on. Second, is the carrying out of actions aimed at alleviating the suffering of the cared for. Up to now, we have the definition of compassion, but care ethics goes beyond into a third step, which is the acknowledgement by the cared for that the suffering indeed has been alleviated. It is this third step that makes care ethics orderly. It gives closure to the story and stability to us. Our trust building model is grounded in a synthesis of this and other theories that support using the story to determine whether life value is being created or not. I will briefly mention some of them. One theory is the capabilities approach, something Dr. Ferrer is an expert on. This theory gave Amartya Sen the Nobel Prize in Economics when he challenged the use of GDP as a measure of a country's development. He said money has no intrinsic value. For it to be valuable, it must be converted into the capabilities of people, freedoms for being and doing things we value. Well, if we map how beings and doings are related, we get our story unit. From being at the beginning, we find something we value. We engage with it through expressions and actions, which are doings, and end up in an ending being, more valuable than the original one. We need to make money a means to complete these loops. And then, if we repeat this loop over and over, we can imagine money serving a person's development. Another theory closer to biology is Bayesian learning, used in modeling life systems. Bayesian learning begins with a prior belief from where the organism predicts a preferred future, moves towards that prediction to interact with its environment, has the experience, and then closes it, updating the prior belief into a posterior belief. A story is a Bayesian updating. It's organic order. One very dear one to us is the theory of salutogenesis, the origin of health, by Aaron Antonovsky. He studied how people stayed healthy under stress. And he found that healthy people were able to maintain a sense of coherence, which he defined as experiencing life with three qualities: comprehensibility, that we can understand the stimuli inside and outside of us to make predictions about them; manageability, that we have the skills and the resources to do what needs to be done to deal with these stimuli; and meaningfulness, that engaging with these stimuli is important and worth our effort. Promotores use this theory to make sure that what you do for our patient is salutogenic, that your instructions are comprehensible, manageable, and meaningful for them. Often, they are not because they are wrong in themselves, but because your interaction with the patient does not allow for the necessary information to flow. Yet your times are so constrained that we cannot tell you all that is going on. We want your caring to become part of your patient's story. It is that caring with its organic temporality that we are sacrificing with our current arrangements. By focusing on the story as a unit of analysis, we can see that if a person is maintaining a sense of coherence, a Bayesian updating that adds value to their life, they can really not control the story. They co-create the story with others. Our unit of time is what it takes to braid stories together, what Di Paolo and colleagues call participatory sense-making. The coordination of intentions and activities in an interaction that takes its own dynamics and gives participants information that was not available to them on their own.
If we understand information to be a decrease in uncertainty, we can propose participatory sense-making as an alternative generator function to the win-lose game. This, we believe, is our frontier because we have become very skilled at the win-lose game. Participatory sense-making, the braiding of our stories into a shared future, requires a new set of skills. These are the skills that we call the ethics of the heart. For braiding our stories, we need to integrate another approach to morality, narrative ethics, the continual interpersonal task of staying mutually intelligible. Don't expect others to read our minds, but don't expect that you're reading the other person's minds either. To decouple health value from economic value, we must learn to produce valuable information for each other. Information that decreases uncertainty and allows Bayesian updating whatever our age or capacity might be. And these skills must be learned at home. For Promotores, the focus of care goes beyond the patient to the household. Where trust matters the most is between those that share a roof over their heads. Many of our patients have nobody with them. The promotor or promotora becomes their trusted person. During my postdoc at UW-Madison, before I came to San Antonio, my quest was to explore how trust could be built from scratch between people that currently distrust each other. Our Promotores CHWs are not the traditional ones chosen by a community to represent them. They don't know the patients that you refer to us. So they needed protocol for trust building to explain to the patients what they do. That protocol is our Nosotros model, a way to carve out participatory sense-making right from the scarcity mindset. The Nosotros has two vectors, the true trusting vector made up by what we want and why we want it, leading to a first agreement, what we want to happen. And the good, trustworthy vector, what we do and what we get, leading to a second agreement, what we are able to do. Promotores build trust walking these 4 steps together with the patients. Each step is made up of sub-steps, each linked to a set of skills. Notice how the Nosotros braids the participants' stories as a non-linear emergent value. Can our commitment to care for our patients subdue economic value into becoming a means to our caring end and not an end in itself? For that, we need to generate information. We believe that in our setting, a county health system responsible to the public, servicing the poor of San Antonio, a city with a history of great injustices impacting our patients today, is a good place to test this idea. That is what we're trying to do with APC. One way to frame it is to think, to gradually change the linear value of accounting with the non-linear value of accountability using the stories, becoming part of those stories. What does it mean to care for our patients when their health is undermined by factors that are beyond our reach? We need to ride that tension, to bring the needed information and get creative. And stories bring us that information. Based on 80 to 100 stories the Promotores report to me every week, we bear witness to the progressive traumatization of life under poverty. Poverty leaves many stories unfinished and breaks people. Financial deprivation erodes the sense of coherence. Then the capacity for coping, the dignity to denounce injustices until persons fall into a state of survival, often into what Claudia Carr calls gray zones, where victims victimize each other. We have the patients that died 20 years prematurely, but we know their story, where the harm came from, and we must not stay silent. Many of our patients come to us too late for us to make much of a difference, but we turn on our alternative generator nonetheless. Sometimes our patients surprise us and shine in ways we didn't expect them to, but we always learn from their story. Damage to their sensitivities exposed what is harmed. Some will go as far as realizing the unjust circumstances that they endured. Some, with the help of our clinicians, learn coping skills, and some might even heal. The ethics of the heart help us move towards positive social change. We must remember that the legal has not been the guide of the ethical. It is the embrace of a greater ethics that has guided the legal. In this dynamic, we have two spaces for opportunity: opposing what is legal but is not ethical, and aspiring to what is ethical but not yet legal. Is it legal that we send a patient back home when he needs to see us because he lacks the copay? Yes, it is legal. Is it ethical? According to what ethics? The ethics of the heart says no. But we cannot just oppose the unethical, without at least a blueprint of what we are aspiring to. And the best way to see what we cannot see right now is to look for it together. We must do a careful selection together of oppositions and aspirations. But they must start with us trusting our hearts and recognizing when things do not make sense. We're talking about them between us and to not let go of that realization. Even if for now we need to tolerate the current situation, our critical awareness will make us scan the horizon for preferred futures. If we know in our hearts what we don't want to happen, it is because we have inside hidden is counterfactual. And as much as the win-lose game makes us think we are traveling alone, we are not. We are traveling together, and we must protect healthcare. Let the Promotoris help you. So to sum up, Promotores CHWs are not clinicians. They and their people have experienced great injustices, but they have remained trusting and trustworthy, the work of the heart. The way Promotores build trust is by engaging in participatory sense-making and hoping that it emerges into a shared story that improves the life of your patient. And finally, in our work, we can carefully identify oppositions and aspirations that allows us to absorb accounting value into accountability value and make sure that money is used for life. Thanks. Now take comments and questions. There are some references.
I did want to mention there weren't any comments yet in the chat box, but if anybody feels, please feel free to unmute or put anything there in the chat box.
Wow. thank you, Dr. Schlenker. You're opening our eyes in ways that are difficult to see sometimes. And I'm at a loss for words, but I'm full of gratitude for the clarity of your presentation, for the way in which you were able to articulate what we want to do in a way that makes sense. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Dr. Han. You're one of my inspirations. But, you know, we are facing some very troubled times. And our patients' circumstances are worsening. And your availability to them is getting harder. And we need to think deeper and create. So we need to be realistic. And I would love to hear comments and if this sounds reasonable to begin thinking beyond the box.
I do see a comment here. It asks if you could share some successful stories of the CHW's involvement.
Oh, I could. We could, and again, these are stories you seldom hear, right? You don't have time. And isn't that a shame? When what your involvement achieve, we try to make sure that you hear from it. But often we end up with the things that we achieve and others that we don't achieve. But let me think of one from this week. Patient that is gonna have a surgery on Friday. He is alone, old, and he needs cardiology clearance. He doesn't know he needs cardiology clearance. He thinks he's gonna have a surgery on Friday. He is very upset. And he calls the promotor. And we realize that his cardiology has just left the system. I'm telling you the story that I just talked to the promoters about. So we need to look for the cardiologists. And we cannot find her. I call cardiology, or the promoter called cardiology. They say that no, he will need to be seen by a different cardiologist because they will not be giving clearance for someone they did not see, even though he was seen last month. And they and the patient was given, you know, come back in 6 months. So that patient is going to have to cancel his surgery, which he is in desperate need for because he cannot see. And we need to tell him. So we call ophthalmology, and yes, he doesn't have the surgery schedule. And he was confused by thinking that he had a surgery. So what do? We go talk to him, start figuring out what's going on, explaining to him all the different pieces that make him fall in that anxiety. And he ends up understanding, and he thanks us. And it is that navigation. What makes sense to the patient that if we reach, we just feel that we done our work. This information doesn't come back to you, unfortunately. But does that help the patient be better? Yes. Was it a clinical thing? No. It was just a making sense of what's going on thing. That he needs the clinical care? Yes, he does. That somehow the messages he got from the system were confusing and nobody confirmed that he had understood, yes. But it is bridging this lack of participatory sense making that is becoming harder and harder for us. Another one, patient needs a colonoscopy. That's another case that we discussed today. She has never had a colonoscopy. She's an older woman, gets the golightly, makes the mixture days in advance, and she is now in the problem that she's not going to be able to do it in time. The golightly apparently has a time frame that it will not be good 1 week later. So now she has to pay for a second batch of golightly. So we advocate for her. We explain to her about how to do this. We make sure she has the transportation to come. She takes the steps. We find she gets a bill for the second batch of golightly. She gets a bill for $118. And we don't know, she doesn't know why. We call the insurance. They're charging him for both doses of golightly. We advocate for her. I mean, it is this navigation of the complexity by which a patient that belongs to the population we care for, with the level of comorbidities that they suffer, with the sense of distrust in general of the system, and the lack of understanding, the lack of technology, and the expectation from healthcare to act like if he's, a high-tech teenager that actually can perform all these automized steps. Where is the disconnect? There's a disconnect. And the level of modernity and technological design that we're taking on in healthcare is moving away from the capacity of our patients to make sense. And we're worried. There's so much that we can witness human suffering and stay hopeful. And that's why we go to frameworks that allows us to deploy our energy in ways that we don't feel drained and that we feel we're making sense. And when things don't make sense, we say so. There's a lot of things that we're doing that don't make sense. I don't know if this helps. I can go on with more examples. We have some pretty amazing ones, but unfortunately, they're not of interest of the healthcare system.
I see there are a couple of other comments here. One person did comment that the relationship between healthcare and money is so frustrating. There's another comment here. Dr. Ferrer says a beautiful care ethic to live up to. And there is a question here. It says, how would you synthesize the current distrust of the medical system held by many today and the repercussions in terms of vaccine hesitancy and the resulting public health crisis?
Yeah, well, again, what is trust? And where does trust in our institution come from? A lot of the historical distrust has some very sound reasons to exist. And, some of our comments from our patients like, well, I mean, they don't give me my medication because they don't have the copay, but now they want to give me a free vaccine. How come, right? So again, we need to own up to the historical disregard of existing inhumanities in our midst. And we need to heal. We need to find ways to prove that we really care. And we do. It's just that we haven't gotten there. We have, you know, when Promotores face the patients that are not trusting the vaccine, we hear them. There's something that is called still manning. Whenever someone doesn't agree with you, still man them, meaning don't straw man them, still man them. Imagine all the reasons why they could be correct. Why could they be in the right mind? And be curious about why could they be in the right mind, and honestly want to know. And then you find the reasons. And if you really care for this person, you're going to tell them, you know, I'm sorry, I can understand why you think that way, but I'm worried about you. And I think that the vaccine is something different than what you're thinking. I really do believe that. And, you know, I just wish you would get it on. And, you know, they feel that what you tell them actually convinced them, because they trust you and they know you don't have a second agenda, but their well-being, they open up, they change their mind. Promotores have changed many patients' minds about the vaccine, but they didn't judge them. They try to understand, they listen, but that takes time. And here the biggest context is time. And it's time that is captured. It's captured by the rules game, by this linear value. It's a global issue. But how do we begin making sense from where we are at, you know? And we can do it. One of the things we advise our families is, you're gonna make an economic decision, make it together. Find ways to make it together. If you share a roof, make your economic decisions together, because it is that core that you need for your health. It is that that person that sleeps in the room next to yours, that is going to hear you if you cough. If that person that you share the refrigerator with, that is going to bring in soda, or is going to put water there with some, you know, flavor, herb or something. So we really think that the story is, yes, it's our unit of analysis, because it gives us a sense of we know what we're doing. Every report of the Promotores, to me, is a story of what they did, and it makes sense. We make sense together. But as to care, as to how we're gonna imagine this health goal of ours, is the household, is that core of immediate relationships that share a roof over their head, and the bills, the utilities, and the refrigerator, and their capacities to care and respect each other and build these skills. But then households and then communities are really where health can actually happen. And we are here to catch them. But we cannot replace that. We cannot replace salutogenesis. We can heal disease and extend life, but we cannot replace where health is produced. And I think as guardians of health, and especially as seeing so many broken bodies and minds, we can imagine the counterfactual and aspire to it. And really it's an ethical call. And it is, how do we introduce care ethics into healthcare? Just principle ethics, or, you know, utilitarian ethics and public health, they don't solve our dilemmas. And as we witness, people going without in front of us, we get injured ourselves morally. And there is a limit as to how much we can face that. So.
I do have another question here. Dr. Hine has asked, how can we engage our promotores more effective with our patients? And how do we know when to call your team for help?
Well, I think you are very good at calling us in. We have, right now, we have like more than we can, our promotores are loaded with patients. And basically, when what is happening out there is not coming to you, the information out there in that, you know, that complexity of their lives is undermining your goal as a clinician, call us and we'll bring you the information. We might be able to solve some of the barriers. Not always, but we try. We knock at all the doors that we can. Some open, some don't. And we witness patients dying when they shouldn't have. And now, how can our promoters be more engaged with you? Well, if you were to have the time, the one thing I will encourage you is to detect whether the patient is making sense. You know, like those three things. Is this comprehensible to the patient? What you are expecting the patient to do? Is this manageable to the patient? And is this important to the patient given where they are now? Are they juggling so many things in the air that you throw them now your instructions, they're not going to be able to catch it? So you get a sense in your heart as to whether the patient is actually engaged in what you're expecting them to do. And if you feel that the patient isn't, ask, did you understand? Now, what if they say no, and you don't have time because you have 5 people waiting for you? Then send them to us. We will explore. But I think in general, remind patients how important we are to each other, relationships, and how protective it is to have trust in our lives and to develop the skills for trust building. I mean, our behavioral health consultants shine on that. I mean, we have that, but even their time is constrained. But it's those skills of trust building that we have atrophied into these trust operations that we are forced to be playing, because that is what structures our society, that we need to somehow unlearn and learn new skills. So any more comments? Sorry if I loaded you with too much. We need to think in these terms.
I don't see any more in the chat box.
Okay.
So if anybody, are you okay with anybody contacting you with any questions? Or, oh wait, there is another one. I just missed it. Is there a way to know in Epic if a patient is being seen by a promotor?
No. That's one thing we've spoken about. Could you know that your patient has a promotor? Do you have the time to call me or to shoot me, a sham and ask, how is this patient doing? Do you have the time? Are you taking care of yourselves? We worry about you. When I know that
you must know about something about a patient, I'd reach out to you. I feel that is less, is a better use of your time if I go and try to get in your radar at the right time, in the right moment, for the right reason, than for you to reach out to me and in the constraints of your times. I think if you were to know what also I try to keep you posted, especially if it deals with the clinical situation, about how the patient is doing out there. But even that, it's hard to reach you. And we want you well. But especially, we don't want you to lose your heart, because you all care. And your patient needs your care. Sounds good.
Okay, I don't see any others. I think I got them all this time. So want to thank you, everybody, so much. I don't know if anybody else wants any closing words here, but thank you so much for your discussion today.
Thank you. And please reach out if you want to discuss, or any comments are always enriching. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.